Hello, everyone. I'm Zach, and I'm excited to kick off the first ever Buckeye Ledger interview series with a very special guest that has much experience in the world of and around accounting. Let me proudly introduce Professor Scott Miller. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks, Zach. It's an honor to be speaking with you today. Very happy to get to talk about Ohio State with you.
Yeah. Can we start with a little bit of an introduction? As a Mac alumni yourself, can you tell us a little bit about your journey after graduating with your master's in accountancy from Ohio State?
Sure. I'm currently an accounting professor at Kent State University, and I'm sporting their pin today. The K stands for Kent State. But let me explain how I got here. I started my career in public accounting at Deloitte, and this was the days not long after the rollout of Sarbanes-Oxley. So Deloitte was a great place to start my career. I learned so much about client service working in audit. After getting that invaluable experience, I then moved on to KeyBank, where I had a risk governance role. And basically there I focused on internal controls and Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. But eventually I started to miss audit, and I didn't think that would happen after I left initially, but I really did start to miss audit. I didn't want to necessarily go back to public accounting. So I decided to take on an internal audit role, and the company that I joined was Signet Jewelers. So also at this time, I joined the Northeast Ohio chapter. This is a mouthful, so bear with me, of the Institute of Internal Auditors. All right, so Northeast Ohio chapter, Institute of Internal Auditors. That's where my career path started to change drastically. After a short time within joining the chapter, I found myself leading the Academic Relations Committee. So this was my first foray into academics. So I was a guest presenter at about 10 different universities in Northeast Ohio, trying to get students excited about internal audit, with varying degrees of success, some success in some locations. But once I got a taste of being in the classroom, what I discovered is that I wanted more and more time in the classroom. So it became clear to me that this was my true passion. So I was offered down the road, eventually, my first part-time teaching role at Kent State University in the year 2019. Then my first full-time teaching role was with Heidelberg University in 2021. That's, of course, where we met. And I eventually returned to Kent State full-time in 2023, where I'm happy and hope to be for a very long time. But to me, nothing is more exciting than teaching at a university, and I can't imagine doing anything else at this point.
Yeah. I know I met you at Heidelberg as my audit professor, so but you had a lot of different experiences before getting into higher education too. What led you to choose the career path you're currently on, and how did your experience at Ohio State influence that choice?
So I originally picked accounting as my major during a time in which accountants and auditors were in the news for completely all the wrong reasons. So early in my college career, there were scandals at Enron, WorldCom, Tyco. There were others, right? So if you're wondering what attracted me, though, to the profession, so the appeal was to be part of the next wave of professionals that would bring back integrity to the profession. It also didn't hurt that the passage of Sarbanes-Oxley increased the number of jobs available in public accounting. So when you're a college student looking for a job, as many of you know, right, you want to enter a market where the numbers are in your favor. So they were back then for me, just like the numbers are currently, in the favor of people looking to apply to accounting jobs today, right? There are currently way more open positions than qualified candidates. Later in my career, when I switched to teaching, I found myself thinking back to my Ohio State days a lot. So I thought about all the incredible Ohio State professors I had, and I tried to bring something from each of them into my own classroom. Ohio State taught me so much about leading with passion. As we all know, right, and we all know this, Ohio State alums are incredibly passionate about our school. Not only our school, but our football team, our city, our state. Okay, wherever I've taught, I think I've been known as the faculty member who wears the school colors almost daily, who always goes to the big university events, especially the sporting events, and also someone who loves to support students in all that they do. So I've always wanted my Kent State and Heidelberg students to be as proud of their university as all Buckeye alums are of Ohio State. So I can't imagine going to school where it's not the norm for professors to share in the college spirit and bring that feeling of community into the classroom.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know I definitely felt that in your classrooms, and I definitely feel that a lot at Ohio State as well. Circling back to Ohio State, what was like the most valuable skill or lesson that you gained from your time in the master's program?
So I learned the importance of networking while in the MAC. Actually, I learned I probably should have taken more advantage of the networking events while I was a student at OSU. So as a student, it's easy to get carried away in the undergraduate mentality of, striving for the highest grade possible in every class. And grades are still important in graduate school, right? Don't get me wrong. They're important for sure, but it's also important to network with alums and your peers at Ohio State. All right. So you never know when you might meet someone who could help open doors for you down the road. Building connections is something you definitely want to do, right? Make a great impression at every chance you can get with everyone you meet. Accounting is such a people-focused industry, right? So you always want to be networking.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great to hear that networking hasn't changed in importance since then and to now. Talking about change like you just did, how has the accounting field changed since you graduated, and how have you adapted to those changes?
Well, when I was in school, we didn't talk about topics like artificial intelligence, blockchain, robotics. But I think as technology evolves over time, right, the important thing is no matter what the change is, it's important to embrace continuous learning. So companies offer training opportunities. It's important to take advantage of them. And it's important to have that desire to never stop learning a new skill, right? Never stop learning about the latest technology. I've also benefited by being an active member and eventually president, now board member of a professional organization, in my case, the Institute of Internal Auditors. But just keep in mind, there's other organizations, right? There are always opportunities to stay current on changing trends if you're a part of a group like this. So I highly recommend considering joining a professional organization in the future.
Thank you for talking about that. I did know that you were a president, but I'm sure that everyone else didn't know that there was an electorate in the Zoom call too. So I'm glad that you spent your time with me today. I want to talk about that change that you just talked about too, because the world of accounting is always inherently changing. What's been the most surprising change you faced in your career, and how did you overcome it?
Great question. Great question, Zach. So I think the changes in education during and after the COVID era have definitely been a learning experience. The game changed literally overnight for all professors, all teachers, right? And many of the changes, such as the prevalence of online learning, became permanent, right? We made some changes and we're not completely going back to the old ways of doing things. So I leaned heavily on my client service experience from my auditing days to get through this period of change. So I knew I had to deliver for my students. They were my clients. Whether class was in person, online, hybrid, it didn't matter, right? In the client service business, there's no point in complaining or dwelling on how things were in the past. The only option is to deliver for your clients what they need. So that's what I tried to do.
I really appreciate your insights into the changes you had to make. Obviously, I graduated right during COVID and then started taking your classes right when that happened. So it was definitely a very weird time. Now I want to move kind of shift into a field that Max students really haven't gotten to experience yet. That being professional life. So for students looking to enter public accounting, what advice would you give on navigating the early stages of the profession?
So continuing on, what we established earlier, I think definitely grow your network. Okay, that's really the best advice. Introduce yourself to your professors, get to know your peers, certainly interact with alumni. These contacts could become very beneficial in the future. In the short term, also, and this is important too, but in the short term, getting to know all of your individuals will make you feel more like a part of the Fisher community. True story, earlier this week, Plant Moran, okay, public accounting firm, Plant Moran took the Kent State faculty out for lunch to talk about ways that we can collaborate. One of the audit partners who came to that lunch just happened to be a cohort of mine from the MAC program. Same year, same class, and everything. It's a small world. I wasn't expecting to see someone from my class. Uh, so anyway, the long and short of the story, right? Continue to network, grow your network. Okay, you're likely to cross paths with people into the future.
Yeah, that's that's really awesome. I definitely agree that getting to know people is super important. And one thing that remains constant is there are people we get to collaborate everywhere in this industry. So, um, growing into your early career, how did you manage the tradition from academic life to the professional world, particularly with balancing work and life commitments? And how is it now teaching accounting?
When you graduate and enter the workforce, at first, it's not easy to crank out an 8 or 9 hour workday, day after day. It's really not easy at first, but it becomes easier as time goes on, especially as you advance in your career, eventually take on new and different challenges, potentially leading people in, manager type of roles. Of course, it helps when you are passionate about what you do. Then work doesn't feel like work, okay? Instead, it feels like something you enjoy and want to do. If you're passionate and prideful about what you do, then even the most routine tasks start to feel worthwhile. I actually work harder and work longer hours as a professor than I ever did as a practitioner, but I don't notice it as much because I enjoy working with students a great deal. I should also add, as advice to current Mac students, okay, this is important, right? It is very important to take the CPA exam as soon after graduation as possible. Work-life balance will be much, much better after you get this exam completely out of the way. Okay, as you progress through life, you only become busier. So keep that in mind. Okay, it's best to delay things like travel, as hard as it is. Okay, instead, set up a plan to pass the CPA exam. You won't regret it.
That's really good. I will definitely ask you more questions about the CPA exam later. I know I'm going to shift a little more into a kind of a debate, a very hot topic in the way we are right now and entering into the accounting world. But um, I know you as my auditing professor, but can you explain why you chose audit over tax?
Oh, sure, sure. Let me take you back. And I'm kind of laughing here a little bit because honestly, I guessed on audit initially and it worked out okay. I did end up liking it, but in the very beginning, it's hard to know, right? This was a guess. It worked out. I think people who get internship experience in both audit and tax, they're best able to determine which suits them better. But definitely not all of us are fortunate enough to have internship experience in both fields. So I liked conducting interviews. I liked interacting with clients. Audit ended up working out just fine for me. I never was really interested in preparing tax returns or learning the tax code. Maybe a tax person would disagree with me. I really don't have bad things to say about tax preparers. Uh, but I feel like audit provides more transferable skills for those looking at next steps in their careers. Okay, you can be successful in either tax or audit, but again, I think audit it keeps doors open longer with more transferable skills. I think the best way to learn how business works is to audit one and then really see how business works behind the scenes.
You talked about the CPA license earlier. Are there any certifications or additional training you recommend for current students that stand out in today's job market?
So another great question, Zach. Let's reiterate first off the bat, the CPA license is still the gold standard, so definitely start there. After getting your CPA, it could make sense to consider the CIA, Certified Internal Auditor, or the CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner. So consider those licenses like I did, or others as well, depending on your career interests, because each time you obtain a certification, it sends a signal. And what's that signal? It's that you're a committed individual capable of achieving goals that you set for yourself. It's a great message.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Definitely wanted to get that CPA exam knocked out as soon as possible. All right, so let's move into something else. Now it's time for my favorite part of the interview. The next segment is going to be a little something that's going to be recurring in each of the interviews, so prepare yourself for Brutus's Blitz. I will ask you some Buckeye questions in speed round style, so let's get started. What's your favorite memory from your time as a Buckeye?
Oh, you have no idea how excited I am for Brutus's Blitz here. But my favorite memory is the entire 2002 run to the national championship for Ohio State football, which occurred during my sophomore year on campus. So definitely, I'm a big football fan. I'm going to football first. That whole 2002 season. So most of the games that year, especially at the end of the season, you got to trust me, they were four-quarter thrillers. Every game went down to the last possession, and Ohio State just found ways to win. Every week, they just found a way. So for those who might not remember, that was the year of Holy Buckeye. There was 4th and 14 versus Miami in the national championship game. It didn't matter what the obstacle was. There just was no denying that 2002 Buckeye team. So I highly recommend the younger generation of Buckeye fans check out the YouTube highlights. And by the way, I think there are similarities between that 2002 team and this year's Buckeyes. So both squads experienced, we'll say, team up north related adversity, right, in the preceding years leading up to the season, okay, that hardened them, propelled them to, change this narrative that we currently have.
That's right. I am very excited for the prospects of this season. Definitely have to look up the 2002 season. So something more recent as well. Where were you during the 2015 national championship, and who is your favorite player to ever wear the scarlet and gray?
Man, these are great questions. I love it. So can't mention championship seasons without mentioning the 2014 season, right? That carried into early 2015 as well. So where was I? I was watching at home with my son. My son was 4 at the time. I would have loved to have gone to the game, but it's expensive. Also hard to travel with a young child. So I wasn't in Texas. But that was a great game. Obviously, Ohio State victorious. That does lead me, thinking about that team does lead me to my favorite Buckeye, right? Your next question. So let me take you back. I've been a diehard Buckeye fan since I was a kid. Okay, so going all the way back to roughly 1993. So I could mention our Heisman Trophy winners. They definitely come to mind. Eddie George, okay, Troy Smith. But I've got to go uh, with Braxton Miller to answer this question. He was my favorite. He was electric. I mean, he could take a quarterback draw and run 80, 90 yards for a touchdown. I've never seen anyone who was a threat to score from anywhere on the field until I saw Braxton play, right? Whether it was throwing the deep ball, breaking off that big run. Later in his Buckeye career, he added pass catching to his repertoire. Hopefully, everyone remembers that devastating spin move against Virginia Tech. But anyway, in my eyes, he was also the ultimate team player. Instead of, if thinking back to when he got hurt at the beginning of the 2014 season, instead of sulking, instead he helped his successors at quarterback. He helped J.T. Barrett and Cardale Jones, who would eventually lead Ohio State to that national championship, right? So without Braxton Miller's mentorship, I don't know that Ohio State would have won it all that year. So he was my favorite Buckeye, and that was a great team to think back to.
Oh yeah, totally. Definitely got to think about Zeke and the cutoff shirt too. All that was just perfectly encapsulated by that team. Okay, so a little bit of a flashback here, but what did Fisher look like when you were at Ohio State?
So the same actually. You know, I don't feel that old when I say this, right? Because I was fortunate to arrive on campus when the Fisher campus had already been built. It was there. I think I heard the old business building on campus was Haggerty Hall. I never experienced that. I didn't have any classes there. You know, I was just fortunate enough to have, you know, Schoenbaum and Gerlach, just like you guys. The truth is, I am actually kind of old here. So thank you for saying the Fisher campus was new, but you know, it's over 20 years at this point. It was built relatively close to when I had started at OSU, but
My last question for you today is if you could go back and relive one experience from your time at the master's program, what would it be?
so I'm sorry to say this is wrapping up because I'm really enjoying this, really enjoying talking about OSU. So to answer your question, rather than say what I would relive, I think there's one thing that I never got to experience, but wish I had. So I'm gonna answer a slightly different question than what you asked, but that's the tour of Ohio Stadium. I am so jealous every time I see incoming Mac students post photos, right, from either the 50-yard line or the press box. I wish I would have had the chance to do that, right? That's a newer tradition. But I have sent a total of 4 of my former students to Ohio State, and I've gotten to see their posts. By the way, that's been a highlight of my career in education, to see 4 former students end up at Ohio State. So if they're watching this, shout out to Jarrett, Spencer, Julie, and of course, you too, Zach.
Thank you. I definitely think you should definitely go see that at some point. Definitely go get down there and get your picture. Um, and then, all right, that's all the time we have for today's interview. I want to thank you again for all your insights today, whether that was professional or just Ohio State related. Thank you for your time and best of luck with the rest of the school year.
Thanks, Zach. It's always great to talk accounting. We even got to work in some Ohio State football into the discussion. So best wishes with the school year and with the Buckeye Ledger.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching this week's interview for the Buckeye Ledger. Have a great week, and as always, go Bucks. OH!
IO.